All right, welcome back, everyone. We're going to kick things off here with our final presenter of our first virtual series event. We have Elizabeth Pierce here from Task Us. Elizabeth is an established talent industry professional dedicated to driving a progressive learning culture throughout organizations to meet company, customer, and employee goals for strategic growth. She has over 20 years of in-depth knowledge focusing on employee development, talent lifecycle design, and leadership evolution. Her experience ranges from large-scale organizations such as Oracle and Walmart, e-commerce to high-growth startups like TaskUs, Uber, Eventbrite, Glassdoor, and Zenefits. She was recently honored to be part of the top 50 leaders in learning developments. Elizabeth, thanks so much for being here today. I'm gonna turn it over to you. Let me just change the host, and you should have control now.
Should have control. Okay, great. It's really nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming. I really enjoyed the last two sessions. They were pretty amazing. I hope that you find this session also equally as insightful. And I do welcome questions as we go through the session. However, towards the end, it might be best to hold it because I may actually answer your questions as we go through. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Great, super, awesome. So today I'm going to talk about engagement surveys and rallying your troops to participate and action plans for results. I've done several engagement surveys across multiple companies, either participating, of course, or actually running the engagement survey, the full engagement survey across the entire company. Also, I've been a manager. Still currently a manager, and essentially making sure that I'm actionable towards those results that actually come through with the particular teams and actually follow through on them. So there's a lot of different things that we can talk about in terms of action surveys. But next slide, we're going to talk about the top 3 things that are the most important. So, what is the engagement survey and why it's important? That's just your basic foundation around like why you should do them, why it's important, what they really are. And then also we're going to talk about the hacks to increase that participation. Participation is actually one of the most challenging things you can actually do at this point. It was a lot easier when we were all actually, in person and moving through towards like, walking up to someone's desk and saying like, hey, I have noticed you didn't fill out the participation for you didn't fill out the engagement survey. Can you take a moment to do that? Versus now we're pretty much virtual, a lot of us. And so the participation hacks that we used on site, we need to flip them around and be a little bit more inventive and innovative towards it. And then I'm going to talk about the engagement company-wide in terms of collaboration, why that collaboration is really important to employees and teams, and then also how you actually plan towards the data that you've actually gotten from all of your employees. And then finally, managing goals post-action planning. So you set your goal, you have the survey results, you've action planned toward them, like what do you do with them now? So you've got this plan, what do you do? So I just want to go through those quick things in terms of the agenda. The first thing is, what is an engagement survey and why is it important? So next slide. What and why? So to the left, we talk about how it's incredibly important from an engagement survey standpoint to assess and measure the employee's motivation and engagement, not just from a individual standpoint, but also overlooking for the entire team. So we want to see like, how is somebody engaged? Are they motivated? Are they motivated to do their best work? Are they motivated to stay? And then also what's their engagement across the team? Do you have a team that's maybe half engaged and then a team that's like maybe not as engaged, which would actually throw a huge red flag towards anyone who's seeing those kind of results around like, wow, am I going to lose somebody? Am I going to have turnover? Is my team really happy with the work that we're doing? Are they actually practicing wellness? Are they taking care of themselves? So really looking for like what's their motivation, but also are they engaged with what's going on? The data actually really helps not just like an individual and a team, but like an entire company, departments, managers, teams, everything, understand the thoughts, attitudes, concerns, and happiness levels of those employees during that set moment in time. I want to be really clear, this is a set moment in time. This is because much like with the change curve, companies, teams, even like with COVID, especially, like people go through the change curve in terms of like, things are going great, things are really hard, I'm really starting to question things, or that I'm starting to accept things. So this is a moment in time. If I consider something a moment in time, much like a startup company is going through rapid growth, that's a moment in time. A company flips over into IPO, that's another moment in time. The IPO was a year ago, that's another moment in time. So you're going to have different results during different moments in time over the course of the company history. And really take that into consideration when you look at the results and you action plan towards them. And really also taking consideration that things will change, responses will change. A lot of changes that I've seen from colleagues have been like just with COVID. There's a lot more responses in terms of comments. So you may have with the engagement survey, you typically have X number of questions, and then there's the option to write comments associated with that particular question or section. Colleagues of mine have been telling me that people are writing a lot more around how they feel. There's a lot more transparency. So there's a lot more data and a lot more information that's coming through, especially because COVID, and then also like changes within companies, because COVID caused a lot of things for companies and teams in terms of restructuring, or individuals saying, you know what, I want more out of life than this job that I'm doing, or I want to go take care of my family. So there's a lot of information that's coming through that's a lot more robust than I think I've ever seen it before, which is pretty great. And then this data helps to drive those action plans. You want to address the issues that you're seeing, but you also want to celebrate successes towards recommendations, towards, I really love my manager. I really am engaged with my manager. I love my company. I foresee that I will be with my company for the next 2 years. So a lot of the very common questions for an engagement survey, you can actually like grasp the ones that are really positive for your company and really celebrate those and say like, hey, of everybody in our company, we are at like 92% of us are really engaged with what we're doing as a company, how we're servicing our customers, and how we're actually engaging with each other. So you should absolutely celebrate those successes. Those are huge wins. And then I cannot recommend enough trying to go with a partner for an engagement platform. So there are lots of platforms out there that actually help with engagement. There's like 5 or 6 that are core. I'm not going to mention any, but like there's a couple that are very core in terms of helping with that engagement. And then those platforms actually help a lot with reporting, versus if you go with a platform that is typically a survey platform and you kind of hack it to meet your needs, you're maybe not going to get the most robust responses out of that. And you may actually not be able to go through and organize the data and the information in a way that is helpful to structure collaborative thought or collaborative action planning. So for instance, if you use if I think about one particular platform, I can organize my results based on regions, based on teams, based on manager, based on overall company, and I can drill down into specific things within those questions, versus if I used a generic survey and I created it myself, I may not be able to deep dive into those things, and the action planning may be very broad and general. So I would really think about partnering with an engagement platform and think about the things that you need to pull from that information from that platform, and then select the platform that works best for you around that. So I can't recommend a platform enough to help you with the engagement, because it's a really heavy lift, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So how do you rally the teams to participate? So this is actually the fun part. You may have this great participation plan where you're just like, I've got this communication plan. We're doing an all hands announcements. We're doing an all company email. We sent that. We did an individual response emails. Those are sent. We did reminders during the team meetings, all the all hands announcement again. We just keep doing this. And you're only at 40% participation rate. I mean, a lot of times people think like, wow, like I sent this, they should respond. So it really looks like, it can feel like you're just kind of running in circles, but you're going to gradually get responses going forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about hacks you can do to increase that progress towards that participation plan. So hacking the participation. So there's different ways you can do this. If you realize that the individuals like across the board, you're just not getting the participation, you can actually create this competition and fun and say like, okay, individually, like we are not getting the participation we need. Team-wise, these teams are doing well, these maybe not so well. This region or this area or department, like we need to get more participation around a particular department. Create that competition and fun between the departments, between teams. I worked at this really amazing company where we actually, when we were in person, there was this drink cart. And essentially we would have a leader push the drink cart around and say, like, did you complete your engagement survey? Great, here's a drink. Alcoholic or non-alcoholic. So it was very much like participation around that. And that's how we got people to like engage and really like, you know, take a break from their work, but also like really take a moment to think about like, okay, I need to actually make the time to do this engagement survey. And so they've gone through and like, you push the cart around and like people get excited about it and they're like, well, what do I have to do for this? And it's like, oh, you just have to fill out your engagement survey. So that was like super fun way to encourage that engagement. And then also like think about prizes. So even if we're in an office or outside of an office, you can think about different prizes for participation. So as an individual, you may have like a sticker that you can put on your laptop, which is super easy to put in an envelope and send to an employee. If you are thinking about bigger things like swag, like, hey, everybody, if an entire team, it's 100%, we're going to send everybody a t-shirt, or we're going to send everybody a sweatshirt, or you can even layer it by like, if you have a smaller team, we're going to send everybody a t-shirt. But if there is an entire department that nails it, then we're going to send everyone a sweatshirt or a hoodie or whatever a bigger piece of swag might be. Also think about team events. Is there something that's like much bigger? Like you really need to like drill down on this, and like the team that has the earliest, largest participation, they get lunch on us. We can do an escape the room session. We can do a happy half hour. I've heard of companies saying like, hey, especially now with COVID, which is great, we can actually say, hey, you know, if the first team that actually has 100% participation, we're going to allow you to like pull in a guest speaker. Any leader in the company will come to your next all hands and they will be our guest speaker. So you can truly hack things in a way that is, you know, cost effective, but then also things that like really truly celebrates the success. And I saw that there was a chat that came in. So for in-person, we had an ice cream truck that came to our work site and achieved a certain participation. Absolutely. That's absolutely a great way to engage and get people excited about doing it too. So they're like, yeah, I just got my ice cream and like, I just did my engagement survey. It's amazing. So it's really fun to actually create those fun, innovative spaces for people to get excited about actually doing it. And then when they sit down and do it, they're far more like, they're in a better place in terms of like, even like their prefrontal cortex, like they're really focused on like, I need to give my best to this particular moment in time for this engagement survey. So you get people in a good mood, you get them to respond to things, but you also are asking for transparency. Okay. So all the data comes in. You're like, look at all that data. Oh no. So it's a lot. Just don't panic because it is going to be a lot, especially if you have a really large company. If you have a company of more than like 200 employees, it's going to be a lot. If you have like 2,000, that's going to be a lot. And it's okay. This is why I recommend that you partner with an engagement platform, just because the reporting features are always super great in terms of being able to pull down information and sort it in a way that works best for you in terms of action planning towards it. One thing I would definitely add is that when you invest in an engagement platform, you're usually assigned a client services person or someone who's assigned to your particular account. I would highly recommend leveraging that person for every single moment you can, because it is worth the time. It is worth the time to leverage that person because they're the expert, or they have access to experts that are in their company that can help you pull down the reports that you actually need. And also think about sharing the responsibility with leaders. I would be very careful around confidentiality in terms of sharing information with leaders. And if you use a platform, definitely work with that client services person to make sure that you're actually filtering it in such a way that is that doesn't share additional information across. So if I had a very large company that I was even like 2,500 people, and I was filtering it down, I would make sure that if I was providing the information to a particular leader of a team, hey, this is how your team actually responded. I would, number one, make sure that there were more than 4 responses to actually like share that information with that leader. But I would make sure that it was only that information for that particular leader, so that leader can actually action plan towards it. One leader doesn't necessarily need to see what another leader is doing. There is an opportunity for sharing successes across the board, especially if you are in HR or people ops, and you can actually see like, hey, this leader is doing really well with this. We should probably partner that leader with another person over here to actually share what they're doing that's working really well. So just be hyper aware of, there's lots of data, but there's lots of ways to cut it. And you can also have the support. Sarah, I'm happy to answer those questions as well later for sure. Action planning. So the amazing thing about action planning is that, company-wide collaborations and initiatives, when those roll out, sometimes when those roll out, people hear, wow, you heard me. And the company and the managers actually care about what I just said. And we're going to grow together. And I feel empowered to help. If you roll out a survey and nothing happens, there's like, oh, well, that was useless. I just gave them all of my opinions, and I just gave them thoughts and ideas and insights to, how I'm feeling or how we could improve. And nothing happened. There were no initiatives. And even though behind a closed door, a C-level or a VP level, or even a team leader is actually doing something, the employees don't see that. So it's really important to be really transparent around, we heard you, and this is the plan that we're going to put in place. We're going to actually action plan around it by teams. We're going to continue to get your feedback. We're going to pick 2 things from a company-wide perspective that we're going to work on. And then we're going to pick 2 things within each department that we're going to really, truly work on. And we're going to action plan towards those things. So when you have an action plan and you have an initiative and collaboration sessions, you announce it very soon after the results are done, then that gives people hope. And that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're giving people hope. So have fun and focus. So you have that company-wide, where you actually share the overall results, you celebrate the positive, you talk about like, hey, we really have these opportunities to grow. We have the opportunities to like self-correct or like move. And also at this point, reminding everyone, like, this is a snapshot in time when this was taken. So just making sure that people are hyper aware of that, because something may have happened in like the 2 weeks since you released the survey, which may have like changed the whole perception of the company or teams, et cetera. But like acknowledge, like in this moment of time, this is the results that we had from a high level. These are the positives and these are the opportunities we have to grow. And then when you break up into teams, I highly recommend breaking up into teams and the team leader actually going through and reading every single aspect of the data from their particular teams. And I know it may be really long and tedious, but reading every comment is enormously important, because there are hidden things in comment sections. So you may have someone who's rated a particular aspect of a question like a 4, where it might be really high. But when you look at the comments that are correspondent, like, wow, that actually should have been a 2. And then also, just as a side note, some engagement surveys really do go through and look at comments, and they say, hey, this is the sentiment from this comment. But when you look into it, it may have been like a double negative or like something that happened, which caused the bot to make it a positive instead of a, wow, this is an opportunity for us to grow. So I highly recommend reading through all of the comments for sure. And then actually when you come together as a team, so if I was a manager of a team, so like right now I have 42, so I'll have to break it up into I've got 4 different leaders, and each one of those leaders, I'll break them down into 4 different groups. And then from those leaders, I will ask them to go through and say like, hey, review your results and then get together as a team and then go through the results with your team, not the overall, not deep dive into them, but create like a PowerPoint that has like, hey, here's our overall results from a high level. Here are 2 things that we're doing really well as a team, which is like just amazing, and we should celebrate those. And then let's look at 2 things that are opportunities for us to work on as a group. So when you look at those, it's being transparent. The manager is being transparent. The manager is saying, hey, I'm asking for your help. Let's celebrate this, but I'm asking for your help. The manager is not saying like, this is what we're going to do. The only decisions that the manager has made is they've identified 2 celebrations and 2 opportunities. So we want to make sure that the manager is not directing information, but saying like, these are the things that we need to celebrate and the things that are opportunities for us. From a manager of delegators on my aspect, if I have those things, those 2 and 2 from each one of those, I can look at that and say like, wow, okay, this manager is doing really well with these 2 things. This manager over here is maybe not doing so great. You guys should actually talk to each other and see what each other is doing. And then from that, when you have a team meeting and you reveal the results, you talk about successes, you talk about the opportunities, when you narrow down into those 2 opportunities, you can just create 3 simple questions that just say, what's working, what's not working, what can we do better? And then those actually can create goals. So if I could give you an example, there was a team, typically when I do this with a team, I usually am in person. And now I would probably use a Jamboard, and there's like a couple other platforms that allow you to use virtual Post-it notes. But essentially I would get my entire team into a room. We would have pizza because we're celebrating, and it's going to take a couple hours for us to go through this. And essentially I would put around the room like those 3 questions like on one wall and another wall and then the third wall. And I would say, okay, here's everyone, take a Post-it note pack, and I want you to write down like what comes to mind when we think about this opportunity. And they would write down like every thought is one Post-it note. So you may have like 3 and give them like 2 minutes or so. And so one person may have like 3 thoughts, 3 Post-it notes. One person's like, wow, I just think this one thought like around what's working. And that's what I'm going to think, that's what I'm going to post. And so when you post that, and then they go and they take their Post-it notes and they put them under what's working, what's not working, and what can we do better. And then from that, once everybody has completed that activity, then we go back and we say, okay, let's cluster these things. Like what's really working well? And we look for clusters around those things. And then what's not working? Wow, okay, that's a really insightful cluster. And then there's another one. What can we do better around this one opportunity? That's another cluster. And then from those things, from those 3 different groups and clusters, I basically go through and we create an action plan or an action statement that's smart around it. So we want to make sure that those are, specific goals that are actionable and time bound. So we want to create that actual statement for action planning. What's really great about that process is that there's not crowdsourcing. There's not you're crowdsourcing information, but you're doing it in a way where it respects the individual in terms of their thought process. So for instance, and this is not to like call out a particular industry. But if you have somebody who is maybe in marketing or sales and tends to be more extroverted and vocal, and you have another person and you have a mixed team, and you have another person who is maybe an engineer and very focused on like data science, the person who is that you want the information from both sides. You don't want one person to overpower a conversation over another person. You want to get everyone's thoughts. So it's a really great idea to have like that Post-it notes, write down your thoughts, and then share that information as you go through. So everyone hears and everyone clusters, which is great. Jamboards is another thing. You can use various boards. You can just do like a submission around a survey. survey. There's lots of different things you can do, but the whole idea is of the team event is to create those goals and get thoughts and ideas out. And then how do you manage those survey goals? You want to make sure that they are smart. If they are, keep going. If they're not, you need to revise them. They absolutely must be smart goals. Usually within time related, working towards like, what are we going to achieve by the end of the month? What are you going to achieve by the end of the quarter, company-wide, et cetera. So like making sure that there are smart goals that are achievable and measurable. Assign team responsibilities. If no one's responsible for the goal, it's probably not going to get done. So making sure that people are assigned specific responsibilities. You may have, if you've got a couple different thoughts around a couple different goals, you may say like, hey, for this goal, here's the team captain for this goal, and here's the supporting team for that particular goal. So thinking about the team responsibilities, because that keeps people accountable. And also the great thing about what we just talked about a moment ago is that, once again, the manager didn't say, you need to do this, or I'm telling you how to do this. Everyone was part of that collaboration. So folks should actually naturally volunteer and get excited about being responsible for the success of the goals. Also report on the progress, making sure you have the biweekly for teams, maybe a monthly for departments, and then quarterly for company-wide. So, and for company-wide, you may even do something as simple as like, hey, let's celebrate these two teams that have done really well and achieved their goal very quickly, and maybe highlight them during an all hands. So really look for ways to be creative and innovative and like have fun, have prizes around things. Really, once again, go back to like swag, something really simple as stickers or lunch on us, or hey, we made it and this like happened. Another way to think about it is like, if you set a goal from a company-wide, an overall company-wide standpoint of like, hey, we're going to make movement on this particular opportunity to X, then celebrate during Q2, like, hey, we made amazing, the next one, we made amazing success and amazing traction on this particular goal that we weren't doing so well in the previous quarter. So like, hey, if we achieve this, then like, we're gonna celebrate hardcore in the next quarter. So as a company, so think about ways you can be innovative and then agile, and just think about how ways to celebrate when you actually like reach those goals. And that's what I had. So we had a couple questions, it looks like. So not familiar with the backend engagement platforms. Are surveys through platforms considered anonymous? And are there examples you're sharing about encouraging participation based on the honor system? Are surveys tied with individuals through a special link? So in terms of engagement platforms, most engagement platforms actually have rules around if there have to be at least 4 responses for a manager to see the results. Other companies, and you can set whatever level, but like most companies are like, hey, I know this one platform that it doesn't matter what company you are, you will never see anything, any survey results if you manage less than 4 people. You just won't. They completely block it, and they respect the employee, and they will not let it happen. Other platforms may be more flexible. I would highly recommend like 5 people, maybe 6 even, because sometimes you can actually look at a response and be like, oh, that person says this word a lot, or this is what happens a lot. So like really truly looking at like, how do you keep it as anonymous as possible and as confidential as possible? You can even encourage your employees to be like, hey, if you're not comfortable writing these things down, please let your manager know, or let them like be transparent with them about certain things. Another way is to create, to actually do skip levels around getting more information around a particular aspect. So if you're not comfortable, please feel free to do a skip level or talk to HR, but like really truly looking at like, where can you make sure that confidentiality is a key thing to have, because no one ever wants to like provide feedback and then there's repercussions for it. That's just right. And it's not a good thing, and it kills morale. And then also examples you're sharing about encouraging participation based on the honor system or surveys tied to individuals through a special link. So yeah, if you have a really trusting, transparent, open environment with your teammates, they should naturally fill out the surveys in a way that is transparent and it's honest and it's open. So really encouraging that is the best thing I can recommend. There's also there can be, if you use a platform that is not confidential, you may run into issues around folks asking questions such as like, hey, you use survey X. I know that when I sign into this, I know that my email is tied to it. You can use particular surveys. It's like, I will not, like in terms of you cannot tie, you don't have to tie the survey to a particular email address. And that would make it anonymous. And then in the survey, you can say, what department do you work for? If you're comfortable, what team do you work for? But then that limits you just to your department, which is why I recommend the platform. Any suggestions for a platform with a 45-person nonprofit? We're currently doing it in SurveyMonkey. I am happy to discuss options around that. SurveyMonkey does have an option to create a anonymous, like not tied to your email survey, which is great. But then just like I said, you probably would want to drop down to like your department or your team and then limit it to number of employees that can respond to that particular one. So if I have a team of like 6, I would say, sure, they can have a drop down aspect of like that team do they report to, and it sits in that, and they can respond to those questions. If I have a team of 3, I would recommend putting like other. So at least you have like a department, a team, another team, and you may have like folks who are sitting in the other section, which is not optimal, but it keeps that confidentiality. And when folks ask like, well, I was in the other, like where do I go? You know, what's my team? What are my team options? Like you can put them in the other. I know it doesn't feel good, but when you say to them, we put you in other because we want to maintain the confidentiality of like your responses, then people tend to be a little bit more open towards it. Let's see, how often do you do these surveys? Is it best to do anonymous? Definitely best to do anonymous for sure. Do you think if you do anonymous, you get better results? I think it depends on the company environment. So if you have a high trust environment with your company, it doesn't matter if they're anonymous or not. If you have a wavering, then you definitely want to do anonymous. I always recommend anonymous because that's where people feel most comfortable and they can share. How often? So there's different schools of thought around how often. So there's the once a year, but once again, you're capturing that moment in time. There's once a quarter, so you're capturing it 4 moments in time. There's also the thought of like once a quarter. I think once a month is too much. But I think if you do once a quarter and then maybe do a spot survey of like maybe 5 questions that had the most opportunity across the entire company in different intervals throughout the month, or even like mid-quarter, like, hey, how are we doing around these top 5 things that seem to be our biggest challenge? And then ask for feedback around that, or just do 3 questions like, you know, how are we doing? What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? What should we be doing differently around the engagement survey? And you can just get that information in the middle of the quarter, which is great too. But I really would not recommend like, you know, every week or every 2 weeks. Like that's survey overload, and people will get to the point where they don't want to participate. So you want to make sure that you're spreading it out. You want to capture the moment in time, but you want to make sure that people are like looking at the survey as a productive use of their time. Let's see. What is your perspective on the weekly surveys that have fewer questions, pros, cons? So I think I just answered that. But also I think, you know, it's just, I've heard of one of my peers did the weekly one, and it lasted about 3 months, and they had to stop it because people were like, I just filtered all of those to trash. So that's really what you don't want to happen for sure. What's an ideal amount of time to allow employees to fill out the survey? So if you have a really large group, like I would say like 2,000 employees or more, I would recommend you release it maybe on like a Wednesday, and then you ask for it back like that next Friday or so. So you you release it kind of in the middle of the week, and then you close it towards the end of the second week. You want to like give people a weekend to do it. And then on the back end, which is like super interesting, you're always going to have people who are like, oh, it's Friday. I didn't know, I totally forgot to do it. And let me see if I can still access it. So you basically leave the survey open until that next Monday. And if you're still having a hard time with participation rates, maybe zero in on a couple of managers to say like, hey, I'm not getting I'm not getting a good participation rate from your group. Can you ask them to do this Monday morning when you have your stand up for your team? And then, so you're quietly keeping it open until like that Monday for sure. If I would not let it open longer than that. If you wanted to do it for a shorter time frame, for like a week, that works fine. If you think about those of you in HR, if you think about open enrollment, it used to be years ago where open enrollment would be open for a month. It's open for a whole month. And then like people would like not do it. You get bits and pieces of it. And then people would panic towards the end of the week, right? Versus that you're creating that like urgency of like, it's a week or it's like 10 days, then people will actually go through and do it. Yes, 10 days total, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, it's so helpful. If you have a really small group of like 200 people, be like, hey, you can send them a note on like Fridays, like, hey, we're opening this up today. You got until next Friday, and like just then close it. Or just keep it the soft open. The soft open on the back is actually really key from a management standpoint of the survey.